Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee. We'll call the meeting to order. First item is review and approval of the December 8th meeting. Has anyone had an opportunity to read? Comments, questions, or motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Items 3 and 4 are for information only. Does anyone have any questions? Hearing none, we will go to item 5, which project agreements to 50th Street Light Rail Station Design and Construction Service and Advanced Feasibility Study for 16th Street Station. That's a mouthful.
We could make an acronym for it.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Maria Hyatt, Public Transit Director, and Albert Santana from the City Manager's Office are here to do the presentation on this item.
Thank you, Mario. Chair Williams, members of the subcommittee, today we're here to bring you an update and a recommendation on both the 50th Street station over at Washington as well as the 16th Street in Washington area as well. So going right into it, about 3 years ago, I believe it was 2012, through the mayor's office and also through council, staff was asked to work with two areas along the current, at that time, 20-mile alignment. One was to look at potential stations or new station locations. One was at the 48th Street area, and the other was at 16th Street, and both along the Washington-Jefferson area. So what we did was, in front of you, is kind of a high level of the scope that we worked on between 2012 through about 2014. It was about a 2-year process. And really what we looked at, if we were to consider or add stations in either one of these locations, we need to factor in what would be the potential ridership or boardings of these new stations. We also want to make sure that we look at service disruptions, what's the funding, how does the public feel about it, not just the public that is in that area, but also the existing riders, as this would have impacts to travel time. And the one that I say towards the end is also station spacing. When we were working on this back in 2012, we then had a 20-mile system that included 28 stations. The travel time for that entire area was about a 65-minute commute, and we wanted to make sure that we were mindful of that travel time, as it does have a direct impact on our ridership and the efficiency of the service. Once we got through that first round, we also started looking at specific things about engineering and designing, more of a technical assessment as to if we were to consider moving forward, how would one even feasibly go about constructing this while maintaining operations of a system that from east and westbound you have trains coming by about every 6 minutes. So fast forward, just kind of giving you a quick area of the 48th Street station area. What we looked at were 3 options. One possible station right at 48th Street, and then 2 other stations heading a little bit to the east, as between 48th Street and 51st Street, that's where most of the destinations were. And one of the catalysts on this was, at the end, was called Arizona Bridge to Independent Living, and now their new name is the Ability 360. They've really been the catalyst in having this conversation with the community. Over at 16th Street, we looked at areas right around 16th Street, as well as 17th and 18th Street, as those were areas that we wanted to assess for potential station location. As we move through that process, working with the community and giving updates to the mayor and city council, the final council action was specifically at 48th Street. One of the big items was the community acceptance. It was a unanimous, not just from the community stakeholders in the area, but we did do onboard surveying as well. And there was unanimous support to add a station within this area. The recognition specifically that there is a significant facilities that's at a statewide and even and region-wide as well. Facility that serves individuals with disabilities, and then once they added the Disability Empowerment Center, the amount of activities that happen there, again, serving individuals that highly depend on public transportation to get to and from, and so the adding of this light rail station would be an ideal situation. When we also worked with them in looking at those 3 options, technically options A right at 48th Street and options B, which would be just a little to the east, those were technically feasible. From the staff perspective, right at 48th Street worked a little better because it would be at an intersection. However, in working with the community, again, from a unanimous perspective, they really liked option B. The concern, rightfully so, the community did agree with the fact that a station at 48th Street is much of an improvement versus the existing at 44th Street. However, going from 48th Street to the Ability 360 facility is still a challenging hike. It's about a 30% grade change, and so while they would be very thankful that the city would move forward with that in partnership with Valley Metro, it doesn't truly solve the issue. So we really worked hard with them and with the mayor and council that we would, if we were to advance this and find the funding at the time, that option would be the true solution for the situation we're trying to work on. So at that time, the hanging item was we found a way how to feasibly build it. We found a way that we could put an RFP out to compete it. But at that time, we needed to find a funding source, and that's really where we left the discussion with the community. Of course, at that time, we were also at the point of gearing up for potential transportation tax that would go before the voters. And so one of the items was, as that was being developed, that if the program were to be approved by the voters in August of 2015, that this would be an element that would be one of the beginning things for the light rail part once the tax were to be improved. So that was the kind of the wrap up for 48th Street. In regards to the 16th Street station area, we had a lot of the same assessment, and where that conversation concluded was that we would defer any kind of a final recommendation until we had more time to work with that particular community. Recently, we found out in working with our housing department that they're going to be applying for some very positive and very aggressive things for Choice Neighborhoods Grant, which used to be the Hope 6 grant, which would add some more housing, and especially for individuals that are transit dependent that utilize public transit often. Also, we've had some recent conversations through working with the housing department that St. Luke's is also looking at doing a lot of positive things around the 18th Street area. So we have, what we're going to be recommending, you'll see in the future slides, is that we would have some continued assessments to be able to have the opportunity to see where that development goes and then be able to make final decisions down the road depending on the activity of those two things. Here's just, again, a quick graphic of option B. Again, 48th Street is the intersection there, so this would be about right around 50th Street is where the station would be. The Ability 360 main entrance is about 300 feet from there, so we think that this provides them good access, while at the same time allows us to technically build it without having any disturbance to the Tavera Castle, which is protected from the Federal Historic Preservation. As well, it avoids us from hitting any buildings when we go to widen the road to build this station. When we look at the actual scope of what we are going to be recommending to you all and then ultimately to the City Council is we're going to be doing some preliminary activities, which is survey work, potholing, recognizing where the utilities are, and then really doing the final design. There is going to be some right-of-way. When you widen the road, obviously there's right-of-way. All of the right-of-way impacts would be to the south. There's about 8 parcels that will have impacts to, none of which would be a full take. They would all be partial takes, but there is going to be some right-of-way. And then, of course, we'll have the actual construction elements. And contingency on this one is something that's very sensitive because this is unique. We've built many of stations. However, they were in construction zones. It's a little different when we're trying to maintain the operations for the system, while at the same time, a lot of it is really looking at alternative work schedules, work that we'd want to do at night or work that we would do at weekends, again, in an effort to preserve our operations that millions of people throughout the year would be depending on to get to and from work or school, et cetera. When we look at the budget, this is just for the 50th Street. It's a big number because you're doing a station isolated by itself. The base construction is about $17.5 million to build out the station. Again, contingency on this one is about 25-26%, which is higher than a typical capital project. But again, we want to be conservative in our estimate to make sure that we come within budget and that we have enough flexibility to build it out, again, with all the unknowns, and try to do something like this while maintaining street traffic and train traffic, et cetera. So the total cost on this budget would be $22.9 million. Here's a quick glance at the schedule. Our hope is to get through our approvals here at the subcommittee and our council this month, and then work with Valley Metro to do the same at their board meeting. We would start the procurement both for the design and the construction this spring, and really get the designers started this summer to working on the final design. And then we would anticipate construction activities to start up in the first part of 2017, and then have the station open for revenue operations at the beginning of 2019. So that's kind of the last slide for 50th Street. And I've got a couple slides on 16th Street, or if you want to. Again, on 16th Street, we were in a different situation where we really wanted to allow some time for staff to work with the neighborhood as well as some development activity. So we're going to continue to do assessments at 16th Street. right around 17th Street, and then of course at 18th Street specifically to work with St. Luke's and with our housing department as well as others. What we're hoping to do there is what's called like an advanced feasibility study, and really as these developments or as activities continues to move in this area, and there's been a lot of activity, especially around 12th and 13th Street in this area, so we want to make sure that we're always refining our ridership modeling to make sure what kind of ridership could we possibly have here, as well as look at the engineering options or any potential constraints and make sure that we can try to resolve those. And then based on that information, we would look at refining our cost estimates and really get an idea of what would this cost if we were to move forward. And then the last piece that we think is absolutely critical here is that the future land use development, what is the zoning like, what are the densities going to be like, how much job creation is going to be there, as well as how much ridership. And so we are going to be able to utilize this advanced feasibility study to answer that. And the budget that we think would be fine with would be a $60,000 advanced feasibility study. So we, from a transportation perspective, can continue to work with all those other elements around 16th Street. And so the final slide for me is the recommendation here is for staff requesting the subcommittee to recommend City Council approval of a funding agreement between the City of Phoenix and Valley Metro not to exceed $23 million to do two things: design and construction services at 50th Street, and then to continue forward with the advanced feasibility study at 16th Street. And with that, we're happy to answer any
Any
questions.
Councilwoman?
We are very excited about the advanced feasibility study in District 8. There's a lot of interest around the greater St. Luke's area, and as the city grows in its bioscience development, we expect to see both jobs and residential associated with that. The Choice Neighborhoods program is also very exciting for that area. I think we will see a lot of new residents of a variety of income levels and really invest in city-owned facilities as well, which are really in need of it. So I think this will make us more competitive for the Choice Neighborhoods grant and also help us with a very exciting area very near to our downtown. So glad we are moving forward on that.
Anyone else? I do have two cards. Did you have?
I have a question on the 16th Street. Currently, where is the stop?
Chairwoman, Councilwoman Pastor, the current stop is at 12th Street in Washington,
Okay, right.
Jefferson. It's between 12th and 11th, depending for eastbound and westbound.
Okay. I just know, just sitting on many committees, that there's a lot of change happening within that area. And so, and I'm witnessing it with all the growth that's happening in the multifamily housing that's going into there. So I'm assuming, because that's where our future's going, and the line is where we want everybody to be on. And so I feel like that area is having the same impact that it's happening on the core and on Camelback. And so we're going to see it in different parts. And it's good that we are going to look at this, because I do think that area is going to change rapidly.
Chairwoman, Councilwoman Pastor, you're absolutely right. That's why we wanted to keep moving forward with this feasibility study, because there is a lot of positive change, and specifically around density around the line. So we're pretty excited about the future.
Right. Howard May, did you want to speak?
Happy New Year, Madam Chair and members of the board, transit staff. I am real happy about the 48th Street station. I went to a couple of those meetings, and I'm real happy about that. According to the map, did it look like there was a bridge that was going to be built there for the pedestrians? I'm not sure according to that map. But anyhow, you guys can get back to me on that later. The 16th Street station, I am happy with that. I was thinking that Station A or Option A for that could be built similar to how Roosevelt is, where both stations are across from each other. Make it like a little plaza like you have at Roosevelt. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Haley Ritter?
Good morning, council people. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this. I'm very much in support of both of these. I was at the Citizens Commission on Transportation Issues meeting on Thursday, and unfortunately it was quite a waste of time. There was a lot of arguing about nothing. But I'm very much in support of the 50th Street Option B. I think that's a great idea for that community, because there's a lot of people, including myself, that use those services, and and it would provide a lot of access for a lot of people that need those services. And the 16th Street feasibility study looks like a great plan. And just to reiterate what Mr. So-and-so said about that option, I think that's just a great idea. And I want to commend all the staff, including Mr. Santana, on doing all this and supporting these plans, because this is a great improvement for all of our community, and you guys are doing an excellent job of following through with your plans to improve transportation in Phoenix, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have another card? Okay, Diane Baker.
Good morning. I'm Diane Barker. I reside in District 7, and I've had the opportunity, after moving out here from the back east, to live in the valley without car ownership for 28 years. So you can know that I've relied very much on the Phoenix transit system, and I'm still looking for that shirt that I survive the Phoenix transit system. I have a different take on what's going on here. I did attend that meeting, and at rush hour from McDowell, there was no train nor any bus to take me to the meeting, so I arrived looking pretty ragged. I was pelted with hail. I survived puddles of water. So anyway, the controversy was that this Citizens Commission was to be born to be advisory, recommending to the City Council. The process is flawed because it's backwards. This entity passed. Mr. Gates, you made the motion. Laura Pastor seconded it. So there's responsibility here to make the project management consultant. For the good or bad of it, this group didn't have knowledge of that. Then they were told by Chairman Pastor that we needed to pass for Able the 48th Street station, and because there was questions about it, I have been a person who has been disabled. I've been over there, and I've worked in the system helping people to get to work and persons of disability. I really do care about that. The bus system is that, too. We need earlier hours, even for the bus drivers to get there to do the work. And now we're all focused on this. I can tell you this, is that persons of disabilities over in that building have so much paratransit. Some of them have the ability to drive with retrofitted cars. They have a bus station there, and the thing is, we're focused with all this big money to pay back the people that gave the campaign. So I'm saying what I'm saying. We need to take care. Get out and ride the system, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Let's care about the riders.
Thank you. Hearing no further discussion, do I have a motion? I think we are supposed to move this
Move
forward.
approval?
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And you get to continue, Albert. The Regional
I
Transportation
apologize for still on the
Plan.
agenda.
High-capacity transit corridor schedule changes.
Chair Williams, members of the subcommittee, today this is an exciting time. First with the station, and now looking at all of our corridors in Phoenix that specifically as a result of what the voters had approved back in August of 2015. And one of those items was, as these new resources, local resources, come into the city, and then with our work with Valley Metro, how will that impact some of these dates for light rail corridors or high-capacity transit corridors in Phoenix? And so today we're going to give you an update as to our recommended changes from what we know today, and then of course we would continue to do annual updates on all of these corridors. So with that, if I can get the slide to change. All right, here we go. So this is a map that you all have seen probably far too many times, and these dates have always stayed the same. So hopefully as we move forward, we'll start to modify some of these dates. But really what we're focusing on are the ones in Phoenix. So future extensions going out towards the Metro Center area, as well as looking at a new extension going out towards South Phoenix, and then going more northwest and then northeast. And so these are all the corridors that we're focusing on, again, are the ones within the city of Phoenix.
Councilman?
Yep. Madam Chair, thank you. So just a question before we move off this. Clearly, just to focus on the leg to Paradise Valley Mall. So that sort of shaded path is not the route that was shown to the voters just late last year in Prop 104. So when do you anticipate, if this is going to happen, that this regional transportation plan would be changed to be more consistent with what was just put in front of the voters of the city of Phoenix?
Chair Williams, Councilman Gates, that's a great question. So what's in front of you is the actual regional transportation map. The map that was taken to the voters was a map designed specifically for Phoenix. So this July, we are going to be advancing a feasibility study for the Northeast Corridor. The corridor shown here was actually intended to be a 13-mile corridor, and then we made modifications when we went to the voters to make that an 8-mile corridor. So what we are going to be incorporating is actually another area that's going to come off of 19th Avenue in Dunlap, heading eastbound on Dunlap, as well as what's shown here. But once we get through that, again, we'll kick that off this July with the feasibility study. Then one of the outputs of that would be to match both of those maps up so we have consistency.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, the next slide here shows you the staff recommended changes, and just know that the following slides will get into the methodology as to why we're recommending these changes at this time. So starting from the top, quickly going through Northwest Phase 2, which is in essence about a 2-mile corridor going from 19th Avenue in Dunlap, which will be opening up for service in a couple months here in March, out towards the Metro Center vicinity area, and that would be an acceleration of about 3 years from 2026 to 2023. The West Phoenix extension, which is coming off of around 19th Avenue, Camelback area, heading west with connections in the Grand Canyon area, as well as out towards downtown Glendale. That would be similar to 2020, that date would stay the same at 2026. The Capitol I-10 West, and those are 2 lines there, it's an 11-mile corridor, which is a substantial size project for especially for light rail type projects. What we are going to be recommending is a phasing of that project, which would be Phase 1 getting from downtown to about the state capitol area, and then Phase 2 would be from just west of the Capitol out, mostly along the I-10 freeway to around 79th Avenue. The Northeast Corridor, we would have no date changes for that at this time. Again, we are going to start the technical assessment for that in July, and once we better understand that, we'll be in a position to make recommended changes for that corridor. So for now, we're leaving that date at 2034. South Central does have a substantial change from an acceleration perspective. The current date would be 2034, and as a part of this, we would be recommending a 2023 on that. And ASU West is a new corridor that was as a part of the Phoenix referendum, and that's further out in the program at 2044.
Councilman?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, if you go back to that slide. So what I heard you say was that, and again, focusing on the Northeast Phoenix route, that at this point, because the feasibility study has not begun, you're not in a position to recommend moving that date forward. But once a feasibility study occurs, that date, you might recommend to move that date forward?
Yeah, so Chair Williams, Councilman Gates, the 2034 date would be the latest date that we would get started, because that's the date we've had all along. There have been some significant changes, in fact, looking at a new area off of 19th Avenue in Dunlap. So once we better understand the exact miles that it would take, the capital cost, what the operational cost would be, and really start to understand that corridor, we'd be in a much better position, like you said, to make recommendations about that corridor.
Madam Chair, so how long do you anticipate the feasibility study will take for that Northeast Corridor?
Chair Williams, Councilman Gates, the feasibility studies have taken us between 18 to 24 months, and we know that the dates always seem so long. There's just a lot of very important decisions. Although they're early, they're typically permanent decisions that we're making very early in the process, so we're looking at about that same schedule for this.
And Madam Chair, if you recommended to move that date up, would that necessarily mean that some of those other dates would have to change as well? Or do you believe that within the funding stream that you anticipate under T2050, that those dates could be moved up without impacting the dates of the other legs?
Chair Williams, Councilman Gates, I'll begin that conversation, then Maria could also add to it as well. But that's something that we look at whenever we're making any adjustments, even if it's something as modest as a year, we have to then take a look at how does this impact the overall program, the overall stability, because what we have now is a tax that went to the voters for a 35-year plan. So we have to be very mindful and be fiscally responsible to make sure that any modifications, we're always looking for ways to accelerate these dates, but we then have to see how that would affect the overall program. So yes.
And Madam Chair, Councilman Gates, just to add on to that, what you have in front of you is balanced, and that is based on the assumptions that we've put in the plan, but they are very conservative assumptions. So we don't know if some of these quarters are eligible for a better funding, better value of funding stream. That would help us to bring up and make adjustments in these. So we'll know more, especially as we finish the assessment on the Northeast Extension, plus some of these other corridors with the advancing of the dates. If it's approved by council, we'll have a better idea. But we hope that that's the case, and it's certainly our goal, as well as what we've heard from the community's goal, is to make sure that we build these projects just as quickly as we possibly can.
Other questions?
I have a question, Wade. At the Northeast Phoenix, at what point do we anticipate a feasibility study?
So Chair Williams, Councilwoman Pastor, we are going to begin the feasibility study for the Northeast Corridor in July, so at the beginning of the
July.
fiscal year.
Okay, and that takes 18 months?
Yeah.
And so then at that point, it'll be determined if it should be proposed date should be changed or anything like that?
Yeah, so Chair Williams, Councilwoman Pastor, we'll be looking at a couple things. One, what would be the the advanced alignment? So the alignment would be one major decision. The other piece we'd be looking at is mode. What's the appropriate mode? Is it light rail? Is it bus rapid transit? As a part of the federal process, you have to assess multiple modes. And then all of that would factor in the cost, both from a capital perspective as well as the operations thereafter. And so with all of that information, we'd be able to make recommendations about the future of that corridor.
So I'm going to calculate, this is 18 months, so what would that take, a year? Or how many,
So Chair
another
Williams,
12 months? When do we anticipate to?
so our schedule, and sitting here today, we would come back to you all to give you all a more refined schedule, but our anticipation is to start at the beginning of next fiscal year in July. And traditionally, these feasibility studies, like I said, have been between 18 to 24 months, so about 2 years. So you're looking at about the summer of 2018. But obviously, between now and then, we'd be working with the council office and really closely with you, Councilman Gates. I know that your constituents have been very interested in this, to giving updates as we move along, and even before we actually get started, so you would have the scope, so that way you know exactly what we're going to be doing over that 2-year period.
Then, go ahead, Madam Chair. West Phoenix, Glendale, there was a feasibility study, and then there were community forums and items like that. I heard you state that it was going to go from 19th Avenue and Camelback. When was that determined, and when was it told to the community that that was determined?
Chairwoman, Chair Williams, Councilwoman Pastor, we haven't made final alignment recommendations on that yet. What I was referencing is that that particular corridor has highlighted significant facilities of our end destination. So one of which being there's a connection to the downtown Glendale area, as well as Grand Canyon has been an area, again, not committing to an actual alignment, but how do we service our educational institution? And that is in this area, one of our significant facilities. We still have several months of work to do in hopes to come back probably within the next 4 or so months with the actual alignment recommendation, but we have not committed to an actual alignment. You are correct on that.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Gallego?
I just think it's important that we remember that this is not occurring in a vacuum, that the city of Phoenix has many partners on this, and so it is possible there could be a new regional effort with a funding source, and since some of these destinations really serve our entire region, that perhaps that could assist us in accelerating some of these. We also have committed to the voters that we will try to use their dollars as efficiently as possible, and that we'll be going to the federal government. I think the South Central right now has gotten the most attention from the federal government. And if we were able to get funding there, that might free up money elsewhere, so that there are a lot of moving parts, and that we can't just look at the city of Phoenix, but really our partners have to be at the table here as well. And we need to make sure that we put these forward for both federal and regional funding wherever possible. Perhaps even in this timeframe, there might be state funding, although I shall not hold my breath.
Councilwoman Gallego, that's an important point, is that we did our best in trying to make sure that we stayed within the plan based on our assumptions. But it is it's 35 years, and so we did our best guesses at this point. But as we do find out if there are additional funding sources that come in, we receive more in taxes than we estimated or less, we will have the opportunity to make those adjustments and come back to the council and make sure that you have, obviously, the final say in what those adjustments are.
And I should have prefaced my comments by saying that this is the regional transportation plan that's updated either annually or biannually, so we'll always have updates to you all in regards to these dates. And the next slides here really speak to some of the reasons why we're making these recommendations again at this time. Like we've said, in regards to the second phase for the Northwest Extension, obviously there's a lot of momentum in early completion on phase one that we're opening up in a couple of months. And then we do know that there's the regional destination, a lot of educational connectivity in the 25th Avenue, Dunlap, Mountain View area, as well as we have began some of the environmental work. So we know that from a project readiness standpoint, this project is ready to go, and we could have revenue service as early as 2023. So that's a part of a lot of the reasons why we're recommending on phase two. On South Central, which was alluded to by Councilwoman Gallego, from a ridership perspective, revitalization, redevelopment, South Central has a lot of the characteristics that the federal government speaks very highly of and thinks very highly of, and they have definitely had their interests on this project from a federal perspective. In fact, the funding thus far, everything from the feasibility study to our alternative analysis study, which is a fancy way of saying selecting the alignment and mode, and then also our environmental study, they awarded us with a Tiger grant to do the environmental. So at this point, every step of this project has been primarily funded by the federal government, which is significant for us. The last award that they gave was a ladder step designation, which is a very big program for Secretary Fox. They gave 7 projects that designation across the entire country, and this was one of them. So we know that they are paying attention to this project very close, which is not just a big thing for the city of Phoenix, but as a region to have that type of attention from the Department of Transportation is something we're very excited about, and that plays a major role in our staff recommendation for this date moving to 2023.
Councilman?
Madam Chair, on the Metro Center extension.
Yes.
So when you say 2023, that's actually being open.
Yes.
So when would you estimate that the construction would begin, if you stayed with that 2023 date?
Chair Williams, Councilman Gates, without holding me accountable to a specific month.
And day.
All right.
And date, right? I know, like, when's the shovel going to be in the ground? Again, we have a lot of information just off of the projects we've already done. So all of these dates that are before you are revenue service dates. So you typically would back out about 3 years for construction. So construction starting right around late 2019, early 2020. It takes us about 2 years to do final design. So we would be into final design mode probably by mid to late 2017. So these things will start to move relatively fast. So again, just to reiterate, it's about late 2017, 2018 for final design, and then try to have some type of a groundbreaking right around late 2019-ish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the last corridors here, just again, on the Capital I-10 West, a big part of why we're recommending that to be done in phases is just knowing the resources and how competitive it is for federal funding. To get a $1 billion project these days and have that be 50% funded by the federal government is pretty tough. So at this point, we're recommending to keep on schedule with 2023 out towards the Capitol, and then really work with the region along I-10. We know that the cities of Tolleson, Avondale, Glendale, they're all very excited about light rail, especially light rail along the I-10 freeway, which has a lot of traffic every morning for people getting into the downtown area. So we'd like to have that regional discussion with them. In regards to West Phoenix, we feel the 2026 revenue service date works well for us. There's still a lot of discussions that need to be had with the community about how we exactly make that connection. And also there's a lot of technical work that needs to be done with MAG and ADOT along the I-17 freeway and where we cross. No matter where that alignment goes, we have to figure out how we're going to best cross the I-17. So 2026 works really well. And then on Northeast, again, no schedule change, recommended changes at this point until we really get more information from a technical perspective.
Councilman?
Sorry. And Madam Chair, on the Capitol, so I guess that would be called Phase 1, Capitol I-10 West. So based upon the timeline you just set forth for Metro Center, you'd be looking at design starting next year for that one as well?
Yeah, so
Right.
Chair Williams, Councilman Gates, so all the South Central, the Capitol, as well as the Metro Center, we're all shooting for the 2023, so they would follow similar dates as I referenced before for Metro
And
Center.
are we in discussion, are we having discussions with the governor's office? Because I know this was, there was quite a bit with the last administration, and I just want to make sure that we have that outreach going on and.
Yeah, so Chair Williams, Councilman Gates, so we've had lots of discussion. Then I think now, obviously, with the new governor and their team, there's been a lot of things on their plate, as you know, but that is an ongoing discussion. And as we've moved through finalizing the environmental work, but that's something that we have to continue working on because they're going to have a lot to say, rightfully so, as to where that should be, the station, how best to serve the individuals that work in that area. So this map really just kind of provides you a graphic of the chart from earlier. The dates that are shown in the black font are the existing dates, and then the dates in the blue reflect the recommended changes from staff. Again, the major changes would be for South Central Extension as well as the Metro Center Extension, and then the phasing of the Capitol I-10 West project. And at this point, the staff is recommending that the subcommittee recommend to the City Council to approve the Phoenix Transportation 2050 high-capacity transit schedule, and then to have it incorporated into the regional transportation plan. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
We do have one card. Walt Gray?
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. I think Mr. Santana said that the west end would be finished in 2026, but the map shows 2030. And so I'm wondering what the clarification there is and why the west end, the west leg out to 79th Avenue is being pushed back. It was once number 2 right after going up to Metro Center.
You want to
You want us to?
Yeah.
So,
It's a legitimate
Chair Williams
question.
and a member of the public, so just for clarification, the map is showing specifically along the I-10 corridor there. It was the existing date was 2023, and yes, you're correct that we're recommending at this time for that to move to 2030. What that does, again, is allow us for conversation at a regional level, because we know that that would definitely be a unique corridor in the freeway, but also will have a lot of service provided to the West Valley cities. At this point, we feel like it would allow the flexibility for the City of Phoenix, Valley Metro, and the other cities to talk about what's the best type of service along that I-10 freeway corridor. The phase 1 part of that project, getting from the downtown area to around, the Capitol area, that would remain consistent at the 2023 date.
And Madam Chair, I just want to reiterate, we do have bus rapid transit, or BRT, our rapid service, that goes from 79th Avenue to downtown. We are in continued discussions with ADOT on a future ramp over between I-17 and I-10, which would make it easier to get into downtown, which would actually reverse how our rapids, right now they come in off of the freeway, they hit down to our part of downtown first and then back out to the Capitol, and it would actually serve the Capitol if we are able to get this ramp transition sooner rather than later, which would be needed for the light rail project. And hit the Capitol first and then down to downtown. So in the interim, while we're continuing these discussions with the West Side cities, we will continue the rapid service. We also have in the Transportation 2050 plan a new bus rapid transit. So this is why I got confused in the early part was that, and we have that scheduled for Thomas as one of the corridors road. It is our heaviest used bus line, even today, because it's operating today, for our first transit contract. And we're running buses every 8 minutes, so it completely warrants this bus rapid transit, which does provide higher frequency, fewer stops, as another alternative, and will definitely serve the west side of Phoenix while we continue those discussions on what the light rail will look on the west side of Phoenix also.
May I have pardon me for just a second, a question following that. Because it's every 8 minutes.
Yes.
If you had a rail line, it wouldn't be every 8 minutes, would it? Because you have more stops and it's slower.
Well,
So
currently,
there's an advantage to the bus.
our transit, our light rail system is running at 12 minutes. When we started, we were at 10-minute frequency. But Madam Chair, you're correct. We are currently running buses more frequently today than we do on any of the light rail.
Thank you. Sorry, Walt, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little disappointed that we haven't started working with the other cities, you know, whether we're going up to the sports arenas or going out to Avondale or all these things, that we're not, haven't done that up to now, and that we keep pushing West Phoenix back when we have heavy ridership, and there's opportunities for economic development, and we need economic development in West Phoenix, and so I'm disappointed, and I hope that we can adjust this, that we can accelerate those discussions with the surrounding cities, and adjust this so that West Phoenix gets a better shake. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think we have another card? Marvin Rochelle?
Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow members of City Council. I have several items involved in this situation. One, I'm going to say a dirty word, toll road. I believe if we had a toll road on I-10, which would be a second HOV lane, it would save the people a lot of time. Time is money. It would also save pollution because the cars now are standing instead of moving. It would also save a lot of other things. We need some sort of a relief valve in the West Valley. When I originally heard about light rail, and as you all know, I've been an advocate of that since it started almost 20 years ago, we were promised in the West Valley that we would get light rail by 2019. Now it's moved up to 2023 for part of it and 2030. Well, I'd be 120 years old at that age. I don't think I'll make it. In addition, I'd like to bring up another item that I'll hold off for another time after this meeting is over and address it with you people on the City Council. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Marvin. I understand completely how you feel because I think Metro was 2012, wasn't it? I think we were very fortunate that the Feds come through with the money for South Central, which moved that project way up. I'm very excited about the fact you could be able to go from Baseline to Metro Center. I think that brings opportunities all along the rail, and especially to both ends, where a lot of help is needed, redevelopment is needed. I appreciate the fact that you've really been working, although quietly, with some of the other cities. I serve on RPTA, and it is a constant conversation about how soon will light rail come that direction, whatever. And I know that we depend upon their share a lot from, I think, Prop 400, which is the regional money, which is going to expire, I believe, in a few years. So I am very anxious and know those cities will really be eager to have that reapproved for the future because that is their source of money. They do not have a local sales tax that would help support it in any way. So I'm very supportive of this plan. I wish it was all quicker, much less than it is, but I would entertain a motion.
Move approval?
Oh, wait, or we can vote. Greta? Sorry, I just got your card.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I concur with both Walt and Martin. I don't live in the west part of the city, but it's my understanding that when the original diagram for all this light rail was proposed several years ago, before we ever had a light rail, that the median of I-10, when it was expanded west from the intersection of 10 and 17, was exceptionally wide, and it was done that way so that light rail could go in the median there and serve the West Valley effectively for transportation movement, not for transportation gridlock. I think this city and this state get stuck on idle once they've passed a plan, which was passed many years ago, long before this city got to the level of population and density and traffic congestion that it has today. Review, reconsider, reevaluate, and reallocate. And do it promptly. Don't wait 6 months or 2 years. The West Valley needs this desperately. Thank you.
We have a motion.
Move approval.
We have a second? No second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments, discussion? Hearing done. All in-
Madam Chair.
Counselor?
I will be supporting this motion, and that's, again, I'm disappointed that we're still at 2034 for the Northeast Extension, but based upon the statements from staff that they're not in a position to recommend moving that date up because of the lack of a feasibility study at this point, and that there may be a recommendation in the future moving that date forward once a feasibility study has been occurred. I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And this is the Albert Show this morning. We will go to item 7, South Central Light Rail Extension Project Funding Agreement.
Yes, I promise this is the last segment. Okay, so again, in kind of in tandem with the previous presentation about looking at corridor dates, as stated, we've got a lot of course, local and then at the regional level and federal level working on the South Central Extension. So just a quick snapshot of the history of how this corridor is developed. Back in 2011, we did receive from the federal government a feasibility study grant. It was an 80-20 split as far as the match, and that helped us really look at how the feasibility of options to get light rail in a connection with the South Central Corridor. The very next year, we then received another $1 million grant from the federal government to do an alternatives analysis, and really what that does is two things. It helps you define and identify the corridor, the actual alignment, and then also what's going to be the mode. And also that grant was also a 80-20 split, 80 from the federal government, 20% from our local, at that time, Transit 2000 funding source. What we were able to do with that funding is identify what's on the slide here in front of you, is that we looked at a roadway configuration that it would be 2 lanes versus a 4-lane intersection, and our lane configuration, and that helped us out a lot as far as the amount of right-of-way we'd have to impact, the amount of environmental impacts, as well as keeping the area intact versus having over 160 acquisitions. We also identified 7 station locations, which again are shown on the map, moving from the south to the north. Baseline, Southern, one at Rozier. And Rozier, although it's the half-mile street, it does have a direct connection to South Mountain High School on 7th Street in Rozier, which is important. And then Broadway, which is where we have our Ed Pastor Transit Center. And then moving north, the Audubon Center was something that the community was absolutely vocal about having a station there, not just for the Audubon Center, but also there is looking at an 85-acre development right across the street from there with multi-uses. The Plaza de las Culturas is going to be moving forward there at that area. And then Buckeye and Lincoln Street. Lincoln Street's already seeing a lot of positive activity just south of downtown, and a lot of those groups are very excited about a future light rail station at Lincoln. What we then did was began work on the environmental assessment for this, and again, that effort was also funded 50% by the federal government via their TIGER grant, which is their Transportation Information Generating Economic Recovery grants. But really what that allowed us to do between all of 2015 and now we'll be wrapping up in 2016 is finalizing the exact station locations, really looking at the roadway configuration, working with our street transportation department, working with the bicycle community about bike lanes, multimodal, and getting all of that finalized. Looking at the ridership, as well as really honing in on the types of acquisitions that we're going to have as a part of this project, and then working with our planning and development department in regards to land use planning and economic development, and doing it under the characteristics of the South Phoenix community. So we're also working with the community on that as well. As we move forward, one of the major goals for this project is to complete what's called the project development process. So what that requires is for us to, one, complete the environmental assessment, which is pretty much two things: getting the project environmentally cleared, getting your NEPA cleared, as well as beginning your preliminary engineering. And then also, as a part of project development to be completed, we have some additional what they call project readiness items, and that's what we're bringing before you today, is additional funding in the amount of $1.5 million to do these. Some of the elements on the project readiness is an actual project management plan. How are we as staff going to be having oversight of this project? A real estate acquisition plan. We'll also be having to look at our fleet plan. So with the additional 5 or 6 miles for this corridor, how many vehicles are we going to need to be able to keep our frequencies for the whole system? We're also going to have to do a very specific safety and security plan, a 20-year financial plan. So there's all of these project readiness items that we're going to be asking Valley Metro to complete for us in order for us to have the ultimate goal, which is the third slide, the third bullet point there is our project is calling for a submittal to the president's budget this August. They do them every August. And so our hope is that with this funding, we can complete all of the items necessary to be able to make a submittal for consideration into the president's budget. And with that, that would get to staff's recommendation, which would be for the subcommittee to recommend to the City Council an amendment to the agreement between the City of Phoenix and Valley Metro in the amount of $1.5 million to have us be able to complete the Federal Transit Administration's project development requirements. And happy to answer any questions.
Where does the 1.5 come from?
The 1.5 would come from our, is that coming from the Transit 2000, I think? I think we already had this program, but Maria can answer that better
Yes,
than me.
Madam Chair, we have funds remaining in the Transit 2000 program that will be used to fund this $1.5 million amendment.
Any other questions, comments?
I move that the city staff request.
Refer forward to council.
Forward to council, sorry.
Second.
Uh,
Do you
wanna make a comment?
few comments?
Sure.
Very excited that we're moving forward with this. This is a really exciting extension. It serves a lot of families who have either only one car or no cars, and there's a lot of economic development potential. We have a lot of land that could redevelop and likely will. And looking at the real estate market, it looks like the real estate market is expecting to redevelop, just looking at prices along Central as comparison to some of the other streets in the area. So I think the business community is very excited, and the residents are very excited. I want to thank the outreach team who worked on this project and who continues to work on it. And I know that we've learned a lot about working with businesses and communities on other extensions that we're going to be applying in this area as well. So this will be something that South Phoenix and South Central are very looking forward to. We had a great last couple days in the warehouse district, but it could have been even better if all the ESPN fans who were gathering at the Deuce yesterday morning had a light rail option to get there, and looking forward to bringing that to them.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is Transportation 2050 Street Overlay Projects Plan. Ray?
Madam Chair and committee members, thank you very much for this opportunity to give you the presentation on our overlay program. As you've heard, I think the continuing comments from the last presentations is it's an exciting time. We're ready to move on actually doing something and actually constructing things out there. And so we're just going to give you a short presentation. This was approved through the Citizens Transportation Commission for recommendation to this body. And just to start off on I'm just going to give you a short briefing on this, and then Keeney's going to get into the details of the current program and what we're looking at for the T2050 program. So as we've talked about our overlay or our overall net street network, we have close to 4,900 streets out there, and so we are taking a lot of pride in how we're analyzing and looking at those streets to make sure that we have good pavement condition out there. As you can imagine, funding has been reduced in the last couple of years, so we're always striving to make sure that we're picking the right street and making sure that we're picking the right treatment for those streets. We get over 20,000 calls a year and just in potholes across the whole city, and so we take a lot of pride in making sure we're looking at the right corridors. So kind of moving forward, this new program is going to leverage the funding that we're looking at for T2050. It's going to almost not double, but 1.5 times increase our current program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Keeney for the details of the program.
Thank you, Ray. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. The next slide, and before I kind of explain this, is we're in a kind of a unique situation, and we talked to the Citizens Transportation Commission about this as well, that typically we're looking at what we're going to be doing for our pavement preservation, our maintenance work on our streets in the summertime. We're looking at and we're scheduling out what roads are going to be looked at for the following fiscal year, the following calendar year. But because Transportation 2050 started off on January 1, if we want to be able to move it forward into any projects in 2016, we're kind of at an abbreviated approval schedule to move forward, and that's why we're here to talk to you today. And so we expect it with future years, 2017 and beyond, we'll be in both working with the Citizens Transportation Commission and this body and Mayor and Council to talk about what streets will be part of the T2050 program for maintenance. And so we'll have a lot more lead time in future years. What you have in front of you, this chart here is we have an existing budget already in our budget through non-transportation 2050, non-Prop 104 revenues, approximately about $20 to $22 million we have a year that we spend on pavement preservation work. And so we have divided that historically between our arterial streets, our collector streets, and our local streets. And because we didn't know the outcome of the August election yet, we put together a schedule that was, like any other year we would have done it. We spread it out between our 4,800 miles of streets and trying to make the best by looking at objective criteria, but also geographically balancing what we have for the program. So we're able to we're looking to be able to treat about 120 miles of streets, and that's local, collector, and arterial streets in 2016. And the reason why 2016 is because the schedule for doing maintenance kicks off in the spring. So this spring, all the way through summer and to early fall, these streets will be will receive treatments through the money we have already allocated, not Prop 104, but through our normal allocation of budget. The next chart here shows what we have put together as an estimation of what we'll be able to do with the $11.3 million that we expect to have in the first 6 months of the remainder of this fiscal year to be able to do immediate treatment of maintenance work on our streets. And as you see, these are all in our major streets, our arterial and our major collector streets. And that's really what, when we were working through Prop 104 and the Transportation 2050, the focus of the monies that were going to be coming in for maintenance was going to be on our major streets because that's where our major transit corridors are. But that's where our major traffic flow as well. And so the idea was when this Transportation 2050 money comes in, we'll be able to reallocate our existing $20 to $22 million in budget towards our local and our collector streets, our minor collector streets. So the T2050 money could remain dedicated to arterial or major street network.
Okay, let me make sure I got this straight. The new money goes to the arterials and the majors. The money that you had previously used for that, you're now shifting to more the residential, the smaller streets.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Double
checking.
Yeah, and as you saw in the earlier chart that Ray was talking about, we only have of arterial streets, there are about 730 miles of streets, 740 miles of streets of our 4,800 miles. So that $20 to $22 million now goes to the other 4,100 miles of streets that are not our arterials. So oops, that's the end of the start, sorry. In your packet as well as a list of those streets. And the kind of breakdown, as I would say, is we're able to spend about, of that $11.3 million, about 7.1 will be spent on, $7.1 million will be spent on overlays, and the remainder will be spent on other surface treatments. The one thing I'll mention as well is before we had the Transportation 2050 money, we had we weren't able to have as many options to be able to do surface treatments, pavement treatments. Overlay is our most expensive, and it's our most comprehensive pavement treatment because it goes there and it really gives you a whole new surface. But there are other treatments that we can use to preserve streets and to maintain them, to keep them lasting longer without having to do an overlay every time we want to do maintenance on our streets. So this additional money has allowed us to be more diverse in how we do maintenance and how we do the pavement treatments that we would normally have done. So this is going to give us a chance to be more robust in our maintenance pavement preservation treatment. So what we're asking for approval here today is to move forward with our plan right now, the 2016 plan that the Citizens Transportation Commission approved last week, to move forward with doing immediate preservation work on our streets in this coming spring.
And this was approved by the commission, correct? Do you coordinate with ADOT? I noticed a couple of these are between I-17 and 35th Avenue. How far does ADOT have responsibility, and where does the city of Phoenix pick up? Because the whole strip needs done. So,
Madam Chair and members of the committee, typically what we have with ADOT is we have a maintenance agreement, an operations and maintenance agreement within the freeway footprint. And so if you can imagine, typically ADOT has concrete, so we call it PCCP pavement. It's a Portland cement concrete pavement. And so where you have the division between the concrete and asphalt, typically that's ADOT's portion of the maintenance, and then we take on the asphalt. So sometimes some of the right-of-way and control of access limits that they have, more of the technical terms that they have within limits of the ADOT traffic interchanges, we kind of work with them. So, for example, striping, if we're striping Baseline Road or another example, 7th Street, we just we stripe through the interchange. So we kind of work with ADOT with that. But typically, if you see white concrete, that's going to be ADOT. If you see black asphalt, that's going to be City of Phoenix.
and do you use asphalt because it's less expensive?
Well, from a overall pavement treatment, number one is it is somewhat less expensive. Number two, as you can imagine, we have utilities. We have private and public utilities across all of the streets. So the asphalt is a lot easier to contend with and address some of those.
Easier to tear up.
Well, it's it's a good comment, but I think it's for the purposes of what we use and what the durability, we see that asphalt is a lot more durable for our type of traffic that we have.
And it's quieter.
And it's
It's
quieter.
quieter, yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Great point. Okay. Any questions, comments? Councilman Gates?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So some clarification points then. So these projects will all be completed in calendar 2016 or within fiscal year 16?
Madam Chair, Councilman Gates, in calendar year 2016. Even though we are budgeted on fiscal year, when we're doing our pavement preservation, it's on calendar year just because of the way everybody starts doing their asphalt, their pavement preservation work in the spring, and it continues through summer and fall. So it would cross a fiscal year. So it is funded in fiscal year 16, but it will be completed by later this fall, so in calendar year 2016.
And can you give us a little bit more detail on, and you didn't show them in the slides here, but there are sheets here that set forth these project by project. How did you pick these particular projects as opposed to all the others in the city?
Thank you. Great question. As we talked about a couple months ago, we went through our pavement management system, how we deal with pavement, and we have a pavement management van that develops a database of our pavement condition index. And so we have a database of all our 4,800 miles of streets, so we know what the condition is between very poor, fair, good, and excellent. So we're using that pavement condition index, so objective criteria to determine which roadways are in most need of maintenance. And so that takes the pavement management van looks at cracking, rideability, surface, how the surface is at that point in time. And so it keeps track of that. We do it every 2 years. We go through and look at the roadways and do a fresh look at the roadways, determine what the current condition is. So we look at, that's one thing we look at. There's other factors we look at as far as where our major street transportation projects are scheduled as well. So we won't go and do a pavement overlay somewhere where we're going to be doing another major street project in another couple of years. We also work with the Water Services Department as well, and talking with them to make sure that we're not going to be tearing up the same street a couple years apart. And so there's a lot of factors we'll look at. We'll look at our bicycle master plan as well and seeing where we have projects going on there so we can see where opportunities that we can put in bicycle lanes as part of our pavement preservation work. So there's a lot of the factors we look that goes behind the scenes to develop these lists. And so we almost hate to spring it on you in January and say, this is what we'd like to have approved. But typically we're looking at this already in the summer, trying to plan out what we're doing for 2017. So this summer we'll be working on that as well, looking at what's ahead for the next year.
And I understand this is kind of a unique situation because, again, you didn't know whether the proposition was going to pass, and then once you received the funding, you had to move forward. I don't believe you sat with the council offices. Maybe you sat with the others, but I think that would improve this process greatly moving forward. And because when I look at, and again, it's not up here on the graph, but when I look at the arterial major collector overlay, arterial and major micro surfacing, and arterial and major TRMSS surfacing, that's 59 projects, and only 4 of those are in District 3. So, again, I was reviewing the language here from what was passed by the voters, and it said that streets were to be improved throughout the city. So we've got it, and again, I respect your guys' professional judgment, but this was passed by the voters throughout the city, and now we start talking about the streets because, again, clearly there's an emphasis of light rail on the central city, just sort of by definition. So if the residents of District 3, District 1 parts, District 6 are not really getting the benefit of light rail, then if they're not really getting the benefit of the streets projects, and I'm going to just assume this was just an outlier, but right now my residents aren't getting a lot for their money, and they're going to be paying a lot of this tax. So I think we need a real focus moving forward. We need to see some equity because I'm not seeing it so far. So that's my take. And again, I make those comments knowing that you guys have put this together very quickly, but that's kind of what I'm observing as I review this.
Thank you,
Yep.
Councilman, because I noticed something very similar for District 1. So we will look forward to next year's plan when you come in, meet with us, and adjust accordingly, because I think your points are very valid and extremely important to the voters out there. So, other comments?
I do.
Councilwoman?
I think it's very important. I think all of us look at this in a very holistic manner, and these get vetted through obviously in a very holistic manner process because you work with planning, you work with water, you work with bike lanes, and I think it's best for all of us. This is great, but I think it's best to see on a holistic map and then narrow us down into this is how we're going to go about doing it. I'm struggling with that vision and understanding how this came about, even though I highlighted and a lot's happening in District 4.
We noticed.
But
Congratulations.
yeah. But it is true, we do have to look at the whole city, and the whole city is having issues because I drive the whole city and see the dynamics. And I think talking to us is very important to understand what we're seeing within our community and within the city, period. May I suggest that next time, I guess anybody presents, whatever's presented to us is also up on the board for the public so that then they can see what projects are listed and be able to then make comments, I guess, right? Or suggestions. Because we sometimes get, it's public record, but we get more information than the public, and then when we're having a dialogue, it's not clear what type of dialogue we're having because we have more information. And so I think it's best for anything from going forward that whatever's given to us, there's slides for that. Just because people are interested and want to understand.
Councilman
Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one brief thing as well. The 19th Avenue area, and I understand there are some projects. To your point, there's a water project coming up. There's just Southwest Gas. And let me be clear for our resident, Southwest Gas has torn up 19th Avenue, not the city of Phoenix. And, you know, the work's got to get done, but 19th Avenue and that whole North Mountain business area, and then the Metro Center area, Councilwoman Williams and I have been working with the residents and the business owners in that area. Not to bring up a sore subject, but our former city manager promised $1 million for a streets project in that area that we never got. So and I'm going to assume that the reason 19th Avenue isn't on here is because you're doing a good job of coordinating and not going in, doing the work, and then it's going to be torn up for this water project. But I really hope to see that for 2017 and other work in that area in particular. Again, parts of my district, parts of District 1 and District 2 have newer streets, but we've got a lot of aging streets as well. So if, you know, the argument is just, you know, an aging issue, and that's why District 4 has more, whatever the case may be, we have older streets in our area as well. And again, an area like the North Mountain business area where the residents have really, and the business owners have really worked, Metro Center, where they really put the effort in to support the city. They're putting in their funds to do projects. We need to see a focus in that area as well. Thank you.
Councilwoman.
Speaking of 19th Avenue, in 19th Avenue, sort of south of Baseline, there are signs saying pavement overlay coming in 2016, and that's not on here in this section. So how do we marry those?
I think that possibly, and I'll have to check the list, but I believe that may be part of the non-transportation 2050 funding that was already been approved and allocated. So those would be normally coming up in the spring to the normal schedule. But I think that was part of our already our overlay program pre the election, before the election.
Excellent. There are some areas in here, including there's a lot of District 6 projects in here, and we've had a lot of zoning cases in District 6 so we're very aware of what's coming in District 6. So there's pavement projects in the same area as like apartments being developed. Is it smart to do them at the same time?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Gallego, like we mentioned, we are actively coordinating with plan and development and with the other departments. The challenge that we have is making sure sometimes those planning or development projects are either in a certain phase of the planning process. So we're actively working with them. So we're making sure that we're not doing something and then they're going to be cutting it. Obviously, we're going to try to make every effort to make sure that doesn't happen. But in the occasional situation that happens, we are trying to avoid those situations. So we're working with planning and development to make sure we avoid those situations. But obviously, we're looking at our payment condition rating system and making sure we're doing all of the roads that we need to be doing at this point.
And just for our help, for our knowledge, if we know when it's coming, would it make sense to build the apartment and then do the street?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So maybe we can, because sometimes we have knowledge that.
Certainly, Madam Chair and Councilwoman Gallego, certainly we have those instances where, you know, there's an imminent development that is coming in, and we can hold off our rolling operation to either a couple of months or depending on what we can do with that section. But we certainly can hold off on those situations.
Wonderful. One of the priorities for us is we want to reduce traffic problems, but also pedestrian collisions. We have areas with a lot of pedestrian activity where there aren't sidewalks. So for example, Buckeye is a major road near the homeless service campus. We will see individuals, both residents and people who are using the services of the homeless service campus, walking in the street because there is not a sidewalk option. and we have a higher rate of accidents in those areas. How do we take into account that data because when we build these arterial streets in particular, we'll often go in and make the ADA improvements and put in sidewalks?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Gallego, so pertaining to the actual overlay program that we have, though this program is going to actually update the ADA ramps, the American Disabilities ramps that we have out there. With regards to particular sections or corridors that we're missing sidewalks or streetlights, that would be a particular project, a specific project that we would be including into the capital improvement program for consideration. So I do believe we have a project along Buckeye from, I believe, Central to 16th Street that we're looking at those improvements because as probably I've mentioned before, up until 1990, the early 1990s, there was no requirements for sidewalk. And so as you can see, anything prior to that, there is, I mean, basically there's some areas in Maryvale and West Side, certain areas in the central part of Phoenix, probably District 4, there's no sidewalks out there. And so we're actively working with a lot of different communities to address those projects and try to put those in a capital infrastructure project in our CIP program.
Do we look at data about pedestrian accidents when we make these decisions?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. I think that's important that we do that. We want to have a safe city.
We do have two cards. Greta Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. The Streets Department, particularly the Streets Department, in the last 7 years has operated with a totally inadequate budget due to this economic circumstances that we found ourselves in along with the rest of the country following the severe crash in 1008. I have three primary priorities for next year's budget considerations. Number 2 is streets. Streets is the second most important infrastructure of this city, water being the first. And as I've said at council meetings and this subcommittee meeting many times in the last 2 or 3 years, the streets of this city in the older core part of the city, northern to Baseline, 32nd to 59th or 63rd, are in deteriorated and or deteriorating condition. Therefore, this is a priority that can no longer be ignored. And throwing a cheap tip like you drop at Denny's for a lousy cup of coffee to the Streets Department. It is integral to the safety and health of this city. So when you're deliberating on this subject, which you are going to be doing very soon, keep this uppermost in your mind and make streets the number 2 priority. I'll speak about 1 and 3 at appropriate meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Walt Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. One of my comments was addressed by Councilwoman Pastor. I think that was a very appropriate comment. The other comment that I have is that I think we need to be careful about spreading, you know, each district getting its equal share. Some parts of the city are older, some parts.
Ignore that.
Thank you.
That was Greta's. You just used her time.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Some parts of the city are older. The west side is not getting its fair share. We're not getting our fair share on light rail. So I think the whole thing needs to be considered. And some parts of the city just going to need more things. If we balance it out to everything, then the old parts of the city are going to be behind all the time. So I just ask you to, I know everybody pays taxes, everybody has needs all over the city, and I'm sure Councilman Gates means that. And so that's my comment.
Thank you all. I understand totally what you're saying, but I had up on Happy Valley Road and Pinnacle Peak, and they really had full of potholes, and we did reconstruct part of Pinnacle Peak. It was, everyone said, well, they're brand new, and we stopped and thought about it. Well, that's true 30 years ago. So even when you think about the newer part of the cities, they're not quite that new. So just following up, making a comment. I agree with you. I think we understand totally. It can't probably be equal, but it needs equal consideration when you stop and look at the actual condition of some of the streets. It is exciting to think we're going to be doing this much, considering we were on a, 65-year plan. So we are making progress. I'm excited to see what we could do next year when we have some idea of how the economy is doing and how we can go forth with this. But I believe we do need a motion to move this forward to council. Do I have a motion?
I move. Oh, I'm on the staff recommendation.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further comment? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Brings us to item 9. Authorization to reallocate Transit 2000 contingency funds to street transportation and public transit departments.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, this is an item that was continued by the full council at a recent formal meeting, and there's an opportunity to bring this forward to the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee before the next council meeting to get a full briefing to you. And so here today is Maria Hyatt and Ken Kessler from Public Transit, along with Ray Dobalina, to talk about what this item is and its purpose.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'm going to provide a very brief presentation on this item just to help explain and clarify the purpose and need for this budget authority reallocation. First, I just want to touch briefly on what is budget authority, what does that mean? Some folks watching this in the public may not understand exactly what that is, so I just want to kind of provide this clarification before I get into the need for doing this. So basically, budget authority is provided when the council adopts the budget. As you know, each June, the budget is adopted by the City Council, and it adopts specific line items within that budget for specific purposes. And any changes to that budget authority by line item does require City Council approval, as you probably know. So basically why it's needed. So the reason for doing this reallocation of the Transit 2000 budget authority is to help us move forward with some of these previous agenda items we just talked about. So we talked about some of the street improvements being done with T2050. We talked about some of the early action items for the rail program, as well as some bus service improvements. So in order to make that happen, we need to have the budgetary authority within the Transportation 2050 fund. And so what happened was, before this was passed by the voters, the city had included in its adopted budget a contingency fund in the Transit 2000 fund. And so basically what this item is requesting is to reallocate the budget authority from the Transit 2000 to the streets and public transit departments, and this allows us to move those projects forward. And just want to stress with this specific action, there's no overall impact to the city's budget. It's a net zero change. It's just moving the budgetary authority from the current Transit 2000 contingency over to Transportation 2050 fund within the city's budget. And this slide here just shows the specific request. So the request is to reallocate $26.7 million out of the T2000 contingency and move $14.2 million of that to the public transit department operating and capital budget, and then $12.5 million to the streets capital budget and for streets, that's primarily to get moving on those items you just heard in the previous agenda item. So with that, here's the staff recommendation to reallocate the T2000 contingency to the streets and public transit department operating and capital budgets. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Have questions? Councilwoman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With this budget, I would like to know what we're paying for, or it's being transferred, I understand that, but what projects are going to be used with this money?
So specifically on the street side, it's the projects you just saw in the previous
Okay,
agenda
because
items.
that's 11, 11.3, and
Yeah,
then
Madam-
we have
Madam Chair.
12.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Councilwoman Pastor. So it's about 11.3 million for the concrete and asphalt work. And then also it gives us an opportunity to start looking at the major transportation projects to look at what are we going to be looking for T2050 program related to street transportation. So it kind of gives us that opening so we can start looking at that and working with public transit to identify those items.
So
That's from the street transportation portion.
from the, okay, so that you'll receive 12
and a half. I believe.
12 and a half, 11.3 is for projects, there's 1.2.
1.2 roughly.
What, after that, will you be able to identify what project's going to be, where these dollars are going for what projects?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Pastor, it's enabling us to hire potentially resources to look at those and start defining through either preliminary engineering designs, things of that nature, to start looking at what are the priorities for the overall city related to street transportation and how that ties into the public transit portion of it with the T2050 program.
Okay, and then there's another dollars going to a different pot or a different area, or is it?
That's the transit portion of it.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, the 14.2 million is for transit, and that's basically gets started on the 50th Street station, the 16th Street station feasibility study primarily.
Okay, so just for transparency's sake, since I'm on the chair of the transparency area, I think it's wise to put, as we're transferring dollars, to put what projects are going to be, what those dollars are going to be used for, so the citizens are aware where the dollars are going. That's just a recommendation.
Other questions, comments? Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. John, how did you manage to sneak one little item on here? Of course, it's a big little item, but capital improvement program updates.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, thank you. Today, I'm going to present to you information, a high-level overview of our capital improvement program for the Public Works Department. And so with that, as you can see, we're going to talk a little, here's the agenda for today. I'll try to go through quickly. I know you've been sitting here a long time. And so just to give you a little overview, Public Works CIP program is made up of 3 different types of programs. So there's energy conservation, there's solid waste, and there's facilities. So within the facilities and energy conservation program, the funding sources for those 2 programs are made up of either GO bonds, enterprise funding, general purpose funds, or another miscellaneous funding sources. And for the solid waste program, as you know, it's made up of the solid waste operating revenue as well as bonding. And so those are the 3 major programs for the Public Works CIP. Before I get into the details, I just wanted to give you some information on the past actuals, which is fiscal year 11 through fiscal year 14. And as well as fiscal year 15 is an estimate. And then the fiscal year 16, 17 just gives you an idea of what we have looking into the future to compare to the previous. So as you can see in the blue, which is solid waste, we've had some major CIP capital improvements within the 11 and 13. And then 14 is the start of our composting infrastructure. And then 15, we start ramping back down for the future. But and the green is our energy program. And the reason it's been high in the previous years is because of the Energize Phoenix program. And now, as you can see, that has ramped down starting in fiscal year 14. In the orange or yellow, as you can see, the one thing I do want to highlight, and that's one I'm going to be emphasizing today, is our facilities program. And as you can see, we've had a 60% reduction over the last 5 years. And so that's a major concern to us. And we have not been really improving or upgrading the infrastructure related to facilities. And I'll talk a little more about that later. And so it just gives you an idea of the overall funding sources for our CIP program. And as you can see, 82% of Public Works CIP program is out of the solid waste program. And that's based on operating revenue as well as bonding. And really only about 8.3% that you see on the screen there is general fund. And the rest is GO bonds. And as you know, those aren't, we identified projects with improvements to City Hall, but they're the fifth year of our CIP program. We don't know if we're going to be able to spend it at that time. And then there are just other revenue sources, with mainly enterprise funding, which is part of the Energize, the energy program. So there's some concerns, as you can see, of our program. Only 8% is spent on facility maintenance. I'll start with energy projects and related to our energy CIP program. And we've been doing energy management for the last 30 years. We've done a great job. We have realized over 120 million in either cost savings or avoidance. And you've had a previous presentation from Mark Hartman that talked about a lot of energy projects, and a lot of them are in Public Works. We've done a lot of projects in our garages. We've done a lot of solar projects on our garages, as well as solar projects at the landfill. And so we are projected to spend about $1.2 million every year for the next 5 years related to energy projects. And so the energy project...
Is that maintenance or upgrade?
Upgrades, energy project, it's upgrades only. And so these are the type of projects that we look at when we look at the current 15, 16, next year's preliminary, as well as future. And mainly that we just look at HVAC upgrades. So when a system breaks down, we're always looking to upgrade it with the most efficient system that we can, whether it's the HVAC, motors, pumps for water, wastewater, or facilities. We look at studies and economic analysis related to energy efficiencies within our facilities. And then we also are doing LED retrofits. We've done a lot of LED retrofits in our garages, and we're doing a lot of LED retrofits in our solid waste facilities at our transfer station, which is making a big difference. And we're doing more as we move forward with our program. And as part of these energy projects, 42% of it comes from the general fund, and the other 58% mainly is enterprise funding. So as you can see, over the next 5 years, we're going to be spending about $6 million related to energy upgrades and retrofits. And that does provide savings to the city. And majority of that funding does come from enterprise funding sources. And so let's talk a little bit about facility maintenance. And today I want to emphasize a couple of things. So first, the city, we have approximately 10.6 million square feet of facilities throughout the city, of more than 860 city-owned buildings. However, Public Works only manages 1.7 million, or about 16% of the total square footage that the city has within the city of Phoenix. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is just the 16% that we manage and maintain, which is mainly the downtown facilities and the 4 service centers located throughout the city of Phoenix. And also that our facilities range anywhere from 25 years to 88 years old. This facility alone is going on about 22 years right now, City Hall. It seems new, but it's already 22 years old.
I saw it leak during some of the storms. It did not seem new.
Oh, I thought he was here for the elevators last week.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. the
Non-elevators.
Yes. So I'm going to highlight a little bit about the current year, which is a 15-16. So in our CIP program, we have funding for fire alarm and sprinkler piping modernization. We've been working on that for the last 5 years, and we're continually to upgrade the system for the next 5 years. We do have a little bit of money for elevator modernization within City Hall, but it's more or less to just evaluate and maybe do one elevator. And just to highlight, we don't have any funding in the next 5 years for elevator upgrades anywhere in the city. We do have some funding sources to underground storage tanks remediation, To highlight there, we have about 24 of we've identified 24 to 30 tanks that have exceeded their life expectancy, and we don't have enough funding for that as well. But I'll talk about that later. We do have a little bit for fuel and infrastructure improvements, and we do have some money for CNG improvements for this year. For next year, as you can see, we have additional funding for fire alarm and sprinkler system upgrades. We have a little bit of money for fuel and infrastructure improvements, and then we do have some funding sources for the Glen Rosa Fleet Maintenance Facility, which is over 30 to 40 years old. That fleet is not meeting the needs currently to maintain the current fleet that we have in our system. It was built many years ago. The fleet has gotten larger, and most of the fleet we can't fit in the shop. So the funding that we've identified for that is an enterprise funding source. However, it's not going to be enough funding to fund the completion of that, and we're going to figure out ways to complete that project. And in the future, there's only funding for, again, fire alarm and sprinkler, space efficient, and the last two are bonds, GEO bonds, which is the last year. So mainly, beyond 2016-17 fiscal year, there's only funding for fire alarm and sprinkler piping. That's it. And so, as you know, the needs are greater than what we've had in our funding sources. And so it's something we're going to have to look at and figure out ways that we can find funding to improve our infrastructure for facilities moving forward. And here's gives you an idea of the funding source for the facilities. And as you can see where the funding sources are coming from. So mainly the solid waste enterprise is about 4.9% of the facility funding source. The GEO bonds is 4.1%. And then the general purpose fund is only 5.1% of the funding sources of $14.7 million over the next 5 years. Solid waste. And so our solid waste program, with that, I got too far ahead of me. So our solid waste program, as you know, we maintain 5 closed landfills, 1 open landfill, and 2 transfer stations. That also includes recycling facilities as well. And so here's the programs that we have this year, next year, and future years. And so as you can see, we are starting the construction of our composting facility. We are doing some infrastructure improvements to get ready for the RIC campus, which is the RFPs that are coming out on the street soon for businesses to co-locate there. And the rest of for this year is mainly environmental controls at our landfills. Next year, we are doing some more improvements to our RIC campus. Then the rest of that is all related to our open and closed landfills for environmental and infrastructure improvements at the landfills. And in the future years, it's mainly, again, landfill development, environmental controls, as well as storm drainage and other things related to our landfills. And so the $73 million over the next 5 years, of that $73 million, $44.5 million is related to our open and closed landfills, which is environmental controls and improvements, which is about 61% of our funding. The other 25%, which is $18.2 million, is for transfer station improvements and upgrades. And the other $10.3 million, or 14%, is related to the Resource Innovation Campus. And so this is where we need to start thinking about. So there, as you know, there is minimal funding to replace our aging fleet or improvements to our fuel infrastructure, which is a concern to us. As you know, if we don't replace fleet, the maintenance costs continue to go up. We are looking at other ways to improve the age of our fleet, and we have an RFP that's out on the street now to get a consultant in and see if there's other ways to acquire and improve our fleet age. And so we're working through that process now. For fuel infrastructure, there really isn't any funding sources to improve our fuel infrastructure now. And right now we're projecting about $7 million of unfunded needs over the next 5 years to improve our fueling infrastructure. As it relates to aging facilities that I talked about earlier, we have not had any catastrophic failures, but the longer we go without major maintenance or capital replacement program, we are at greater risk at a catastrophic event. And so we are projecting between 30 and 35 million of unfunded needs over the next 5 years related to our facility maintenance. And the last that I'm going to talk to you about is technology improvements. And what we got to do, we do have some improvements there, and so, which relates to elevators. And so we need to replace our technology, which is our badging program and access control systems, which all relates to the elevator and access into our facilities. And so right now, our badging program and access support is coming out of support in the year 2018 and the 2020. And so right there, we have an unfunded need of about $5 million to replace our badging system and access control. And so we are going to be looking at ways on how we can do that. But right now, these items I've talked to you today about is not in our program. As it relates to city asset management, right now, as I talked about, I only talking about our city facilities. There's another 9 million square feet of city facilities throughout the city that we don't know what age or how they're doing at this time, because we don't have a centralized asset management system. And so we would like to, and we're looking at ways to put a citywide system in place so we can come to you and let you know exactly what's going on with our facilities, our infrastructure, because at this time we don't, because it's not in the centralized system. And so we know that if we're having these issues at our facilities, I'm sure the other departments will be facing similar situations, but right now we don't know what they are. And so with that, I'm done, and we're here. Any questions?
I have a couple questions. Starting with the last first, the asset management. It seems like to me 2 or 3 years ago, we requested a list of all the housing the city owned. And it was quite the undertaking. That was the first time I found out we didn't have an inventory list of our assets. And they were putting something together with technology to come up with that list. Can that be modified, I guess? Have you pursued that to see if there's a way that could be used to help you?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, that system has identified the facilities themselves. We know which facilities are. What we haven't identified is what shape each facility is in. And so normally you have a facility assessment done and you know what major maintenance need to be completed, what repairs, preventative maintenance on each of the different facilities. And so that is what's not being done on a citywide basis. And so that is something we would like to put in place so we know exactly what condition each of the facilities are in, and we would know what funding needs to make sure that we can continue to repair and replace the systems before we have those catastrophic events.
Is part of this because the last few years have been very lean and operations money was what I believe was probably reduced the most of everything in your budget?
Well, to clarify, I can talk about public works facilities only. It's true. The first thing that goes is maintenance. And so that's the first thing that went. As you saw, 60% of our budget has been cut over the last 5 years. I'm sure other city departments, the same situation. Their priorities to make sure they continue to run their programs and making sure they continue on. And again, maintenance is the first thing that's cut. And so that is something that we are trying to work with other departments to make sure that they continue to make sure that their systems and equipment are maintained the way they should be now and into the future.
I know we've also had many talks about internal versus private services.
Mm-hmm.
And are you considering in any way hiring an outside source to provide inspections to help deal with this many projects, or are other departments who are housed in those buildings doing something similar? How can you coordinate it?
We can work with the other departments to see if they would be willing to bring on consultants to evaluate the condition of their facilities. The fire department is a great example of a department that really does a great job of making sure that their facilities are maintained. They make sure their roofs are done on an annual basis, their HVAC systems are, preventative maintenance is done on them to make sure that they continue to operate the way they're supposed to. And they're one of the best departments in the city right now that really does a good job of that. Again, some of the other departments, again, their focus is their programs. And again, we're working with them as much as we can, but again, it's something that they would have to look at to see if they're willing to do that.
Then I have one last question. When you are doing your budget and you're prioritizing projects, and you know you have this much need, how do you justify starting new projects down at the center?
Which project are you talking about?
Well, you've got the composting, you've got the entrepreneurship program. How do you justify that?
Okay, Madam Chair, just to clarify, so the composting program, that's all enterprise funded, and it's non-general purpose funded source. So that funding source cannot be used for some of these unfunded needs that we talked about, which is facility maintenance, fueling infrastructure, and anything that we can relate to solid waste and general purpose, we try to do that. Like a good example is the Glen Rosa Fleet Shop. Probably 50–60% of the use of that fleet shop is solid waste, so that's why solid waste is providing that funding source, not general purpose fund. And so that's why our program is done that way. And so we can't intermix solid waste to do facilities or other types of programs. It has to relate specifically to solid waste only.
I guess when we look at you and we hear and talk to you, most of the time it's on solid waste things.
Yes.
It was easy to forget you have other assigned responsibilities outside of that, which would require the different funding.
Right.
So, anyone have any, Councilwoman?
Within solid waste, we have 2 landfills that are at least partially within District 8 where we've started working, and it sounded like from your report there's really not any capital investments in the near term that might help us get ready to maybe get those redeveloped, because we have seen interest from the private sector, but it does require some city investment to move forward with the potential RFP process.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Gallego, currently in the program we don't. The only funding that we have in our current program relates to environmental controls. So we do have funding sources to maintain the gas collection system and erosion control, that kind of stuff. However, we do have what we call an end use fund for these closed landfills. So when there is a project that does pop up as it relates to these closed landfill, we have some a funding source that we can tap into, not probably 100% of it, but tap into to help fund that project. A good example is Skunk Creek Landfill. We've helped the Parks Department do a plan on what that project could look like at that landfill. And we do have about $2 million identified, possibly now and into the future, to help fund a park for the Skunk Creek landfill. So the other landfills, we have a funding source, but there hasn't been any projects identified for them at this time.
Because we have seen interest from the private sector. Do you believe we have adequate funding in this proposed capital improvement program to move forward?
That's something we'll have to look into. I think as projects come on, they usually take a long period of time. So if we don't for this 5-year, we will be able to program in the next year or the future fiscal years when the time comes.
One of the things my predecessors planned along the site, the Rio Salado Salt River, is a trail, and it will go by our Resource Innovation Campus. The early versions of the map didn't fund anything related to that. Any updates on whether that is included in this year's CIP?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Gallego, no, it's not. However, as part of our improvement for the RIC campus, we are looking to make sure that it will integrate with the Rio Salado plan, and we will look at just some trails and some improvements to make sure that it aligns with the intent of that project.
We've been trying to ask private developers to do the same, so I think it's important that the city does
That's
as
correct.
well, and that really can be an asset. You spoke about some of the problems with underground storage tanks. Is there any money available from the state's fund?
That's something that we're going to have to look at, and we're going to have to look at with our Office of Environmental Programs to see if there is some other funding sources for improvements to our underground and above ground storage tanks that we have throughout the city. We have approximately 85 storage sites that we manage and maintain throughout the city of Phoenix. So we are going through the process now and evaluate. I think there's about 25 sites that have exceeded their life, 30-year life. And so those are the ones that we're going to be focusing on first.
Did you have anything in the state legislative agenda this year, or just the agenda for government affairs to go out? And
Nothing right now, no.
And you spoke about the need to update the badging system as well. That seems like that's a real security concern, and there may be new federal cybersecurity rules that affect our access control. I wonder if UASI funding is a potential source to help us with that. We have a lot of critical projects, but that access control seems like, especially with critical facilities, not to be very high on our list.
And we will be working with the Police Department and Homeland Security related to badging and access control, because we have access control throughout all sites throughout the city of Phoenix, not just downtown, but whether it's libraries, police, parks, human services, there's badging control at each of the different facilities throughout the city of Phoenix. So it's important, as well as water and wastewater.
Thanks, that's all.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is going back to technology related and badging. I believe, or all of us have been told that we have been centralizing technology and have a huge modernization program moving out throughout the city. So I'm not understanding why this piece wouldn't be part of the modernization of the whole city. And why is it still siloing out and not being part of the bigger plan and being infused in the bigger plan?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, if I remember right, the badging and access control has been put into the IT plan. However, there's just not any funding sources assigned to figure out how to get that going. And that would become a centralized program that we're going to be looking at as well. And that's why police and Homeland Security are going to be part of that process. And we're looking at making some organizational changes related to that, because right now Public Works manages badging and access control, and police and Homeland Security are looking at taking over the management of that system because of the Homeland Security is cyber risk related to that process.
Okay, so I'll have an off conversation with everybody, because my understanding is everything's going to fall under one department and everybody is working together and collaborating. And I'm getting a sense that that's not, or we're in the middle of transition probably.
We're in the
Okay,
middle of
I'll use that.
yes,
We're in the
we
middle
are
of
in the middle
transition.
Yes.
Okay, because that's what and my understanding and well, we as a council have worked very hard in wanting for departments to collaborate, wanting to bring in different pieces of looking at different procurement ways for efficiency. And so that's what triggered me. The other piece is the LED lighting. How is that working? Because transportation is doing a piece of LED lighting, parks is, how are you guys collaborating on all of this?
We are working together as departments as it relates to LED lighting. So I know parks and transportation are related to LED street lighting. And then Mark Hartman and all the other departments are going to be working together as it relates to LED for facility lighting. And so it's two different types of systems, but we are all working together as a city as it relates to LED lighting for city facilities. There's going to be, there's a request for information, I think, out in the streets related to LED lighting for city facilities. And so we're waiting to see what we get back. and then there's going to be an RFP related to that. And we are part of that process that Mark Hartman and his team has put together.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you very much. We appreciate the report. Brings us to call to the public. Howard May.
Hello again. Two things. One is across the city you have different bus stops that need to be looked at, problem with lighting and whatnot. And one thing that transit I think should do is do an audit of the next ride and have that inventoried. I stumbled upon a problem of duplication of a number when you guys put the stops back in at 19th Avenue along that stretch of the light rail. Thank you.
Thank you. Walt Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. Just wanted to suggest to you, and maybe you have already considered it, as far as the T2050 program is concerned, that there be opportunities to develop apprenticeships, internships, training in all phases, light rail, transit, and streets. Mechanics, construction workers, all kinds of jobs within that 2050 program. It'd be very good if we had some training programs involved in that so that people who are in the community, who pay taxes, who are working, but working at entry-level jobs. These are 30 and 40-year-old men and women, and I think it'd be great to upgrade them. And this is an opportunity to upgrade these people, a considerable number of them. And so I suggest that to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Haley Ritter.
Members of the council and Madam Chair, I apologize for not having the information about the overlay before the meeting, but I noticed that item number 3, Central Avenue from Camelback to Bethany Home, that was recently done because I remember when the bicycle lane went in there. I'm a big fan of bike lanes, and that's item number 3 on this overlay project. Whereas streets like some of the ones that I live in Westwood community, which is between 23rd Avenue and 19th, from Camelback down to Turney, and Turney is in horrible condition at 23rd Avenue. There's almost no asphalt whatsoever. It's nothing but grit and rocks. So I know that there's a lot of projects out there that really need serious attention, and I've noticed the sort of superficiality of this list of projects. It seems like a lot of them are very, they're very highly trafficked streets, but there's also a lot of streets and I know that there was a traffic study done in my neighborhood recently, and I think I thought that some of the attention was going to be given to my community, but I just wanted to mention that I'm very concerned about 23rd Avenue too. There's tons of potholes up and down between Camelback and Indian School. And then I recently got you guys to put a bike lane on Indian School between 23rd Avenue and Camelback, and I'm so grateful for that. I hope that as Indian School gets more attention further eastbound from 19th Avenue to 7th Avenue, I'm surprised that kind of street isn't included on here. But again, Central Avenue between Camelback and Bethany Home was just done like a few years ago, so I don't know why it's gotten so much attention. I mean, I'm excited about all of it, but I thank you so much for all your hard work, and Councilwoman Pastor, I really appreciate all of your transparency and holding people accountable for their decisions. And seriously, I mean, you guys are doing a great job, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we have any other cards? No? Okay. I saw somebody pointing that way, but I don't see any hands up. So it brings us to future items. We do have a list here. If there's anything you want to add, you can ask today or bring it to our attention. We have 2 meetings scheduled, one for February 9th and one for February 23rd.
I appreciated Walt's suggestion about apprenticeships, and I also know that our water department has a lot of workforce challenges, and they're looking at different partnerships, including apprenticeships. So perhaps near the several months out, we might get an update on the infrastructure workforce at
Okay.
the city.
Anything else? Hearing none, we are adjourned.